Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm your host, Jordan Jones. Wow, we're back here today after one of the best weekends of Purdue sports that I can remember. It was a Purdue party all day in Wrigleyville on Saturday. Football took care of business against Northwestern. Meanwhile, out in Connecticut, Purdue basketball took part in the nation's best neutral site tournament, for this year at least, and they left with a championship trophy coming back to West Lafayette. Plenty of exciting stuff to discuss here on the show today, as well as being joined by a special guest to help us preview the Old Oaken Bucket game. So let's get going here. But, first, just wanted to point out it's Thanksgiving week here, recording on Monday night. I just want to take a moment, thank all of you who listen to the show. We're a year and a half into this podcast that I started as a COVID boredom thing when, we were sent home when I was still in college, sent home from school. I decided to start the podcast and had my first episode about Matt Harms and No Gel Eastern leaving. How long ago that feels now, but, I love doing this. I've had a blast interacting with you all on Twitter and throughout the show. I can't wait to see what the future holds here for the podcast. But for now, just want to express my sincere thanks to you all who support the show. But to get into the actual content for today, Purdue takes down Northwestern 32-14. Pretty easy win for Purdue. I didn't think Purdue played great. Certainly wasn't their best performance, but, Purdue led the whole game. Took a little bit longer to put away than maybe you would have hoped, but, nonetheless, they covered the spread. Pretty easy win. Some thoughts from the football game, and obviously number one, it was the storyline of the game, the novelty of playing it at Wrigley Field. I had the chance to be there sitting down on what was the third base end zone, as odd as that was to say. It was cool to see. I'm a Cubs fan myself, so seeing that was fun. It was an odd crowd. There were a lot more Northwestern people than I expected with how poor their team has been all year, but credit to the Wildcat fans for showing up. They were pretty quiet all day, which always makes it a little more awkward and weird, but the layout of the game itself was kind of weird too. You look at how much green grass was out behind the one bench sideline, which was also weird. Abnormal game to say the least, but for a novelty type game, it worked. Northwestern's not going to go playing all their home games at Wrigley Field anytime soon. But, it was cool. The playing surface was awful. You could see guys slipping over the infield all day. Saw that impact two Purdue kickoffs there, one of which was bizarre, not onside kick, but worked like an onside kick that got Purdue the ball to start the second half. I'm glad I made the trip. Very fun to see a lot of black and gold up in Wrigleyville. The only downside, sitting there with the Northwestern PA guy saying we're going to move those chains after every single first down, and their stupid Wildcat roar that they play at random times. That was kind of a pain, but, it was a fun time. Wrigley Field is just a fantastic venue. Had an absolute blast up there. Another week, another excellent performance for Aiden O'Connell. 29 for 39, 423 yards, 3 touchdowns. And, all right, I'm there. O'Connell is playing like Purdue's best quarterback since Kyle Orton, when Orton was first team All Big Ten back in 2004. I'm sorry, Curtis Painter. Sorry, Joey Elliott. I'm sorry, David Blau. O'Connell is balling right now. He has had a fantastic month. That Wisconsin game, what was that, October 23rd? That was bad. He struggled there, but ever since, a Strong performance up at Nebraska to win the game. Lights out against Michigan State. Really as good as you could possibly have asked for against Ohio State. Another quality performance against Northwestern. Just incredible stuff from him. You never would have imagined that this would be the reality for Purdue right here. I don't think I ever would have thought that it would be year 5 of Jeff Brohm and the starting quarterback would be a walk-on. Not one of the guys that Brohm handpicked in recruiting, basically. But it's working. Jack Plummer played pretty well this year, and O'Connell is simply just playing better. It's a simply beating out scenario. And there's nothing wrong with that for Purdue. You'll take competition. Competition drives excellence. So it's been excellent for Aiden O'Connell. And he had some different help on Saturday with Milton Wright, a guy who really this has been a big year for Milton Wright. And it didn't get off to the best start. He had that drop touchdown against Oregon State, was a little bit slow early on. Had some drops against Notre Dame. But lately he's been very good in the Michigan State game. And on Saturday, he had his clear best day of his career. 8 receptions, 213 for 3 touchdowns. A pair of deep balls down the sideline from O'Connell for touchdowns. Another one out in the corner of the right field end zone. Just beautiful execution on a lot of these balls. O'Connell throwing those deep seams, those were impressive. Those are throws that you don't see a lot in college. Hitting guys in stride, going down the sideline is a tough throw to make. O'Connell did it twice to perfection. That was big time. And now for Milton Wright, he's going to be the first guy Purdue looks to next year because, like it or not, I know in Jeff Brohm's press conference today, he wouldn't come out and say that David Bell would be gone after this year, Bell and Karlaftis, but we know the truth. We know David Bell's done after this year. He's going to go pro. He's going to have a nice NFL career. Wright is your guy who's going to get the first crack at that wide receiver 1 spot next year. He's going to be the guy who Purdue looks to be your, I know 100-yard-a-game receiver is probably not realistic. That's elite stuff, but he's going to be your guy who has that opportunity to be your elite receiver. Your all Big Ten caliber receiver, simply based off how much Purdue throws the ball. Wright is starting to look more and more ready to take that role over. The receiver room should be loaded next year. Again, hopefully Mershawn Rice and Abdur-Rahman Yassin get back healthy. But Milton Wright looked very good, and he overshadowed David Bell's, a pedestrian day. I say that kiddingly. Excellent day, 12 receptions for 101 yards. And we're barely talking about that because that's how good Milton Wright was. And that's how elite those numbers are. That David Bell is now 101 yards away from the single-season receiving yards record for Purdue. Looking to take over John Standiford's record there. That's not even what people are talking about after Purdue wins up at Wrigley. That's crazy. That is the quietest 100-yard game I can remember. He is just an incredible receiver. The best in Purdue history. No doubt about it in my mind either. I think any argument for Standiford, for Stubblefield, for Rondale Moore, if you really want to bend that argument, I think that's all over. I think it's David Bell, folks. Number 3 gets his final send-off at Ross-Ade Stadium on Saturday. He's deserved it. He has been phenomenal this year. The disappointing part, if you're criticizing Purdue's offense, you settled for way too many field goals. Mitchell Finneran 4 for 5 on the day. He missed his first kick badly right in front of me, but then he was rock solid the rest of the day. Knocks in 4. That's a good thing to see him solidify. We're now to the odd point of the year, though, where is Mitch Finneran coming back next year? I don't know. He has the extra COVID year. I know early on in the season when he was, consistently making kicks, that was a big talking point. Now, who knows? I don't know what Purdue's plans are there. But you're settling for too many field goals. And even against the Big Ten's worst run defense, and the worst run defense in the league by a mile, Purdue still got absolutely nothing going on the ground. Just 50 yards rushing on the day. I don't always know what of it could be a scheme issue versus just a lack of talent both on the offensive line and at running back, but you're going to need to keep investing in this area during this offseason. Xander Horvath's going to be gone. You'll bring King DeRue back. You will bring Dylan Downing back, and you will get Samson James, the Indiana transfer, who had a heck of a game the last time Purdue and IU met. He'll be eligible to play next year. So you kind of swap out Horvath for James. Hopefully, the line can take a step forward because, yes, Purdue's throwing the ball at a really high level right now, but if you look out into the future to how Purdue continues to build on success, it's going to need to run the ball better than it has the past 3 seasons. The defense bounced back nicely. Only 303 yards allowed is pretty good, especially when you consider that Northwestern won the time of possession battle, limiting them to 303 is solid. You only allow 14 points. That's going to win you a lot of games. 7 of those came on the last play of the first half. Really, really good stuff from the defense. They were in the backfield all day. Northwestern's a bad offensive line. They made them pay. As a whole, it's just not a good Northwestern team. Andrew Marty, Ryan Helinski, it didn't really matter. Neither of them made much of a difference. When you're losing by 3 scores as the final score, and it's a 44 run to 25 pass split in your offense, that says all you need to know about what Northwestern's limitations are on offense and what Pat Fitzgerald is comfortable doing with them. And that's not much. Fitz is going to have to hit the portal hard because, this is a Big Ten West that if you don't have a quarterback in, you're really going to struggle. Northwestern's there this year. Nebraska, I can't pin it all on Martinez, but you need to have a solid quarterback to be a difference maker in the West. My final thought here before we get to, I know what you all want to talk about, and that's basketball. Purdue performed as a big favorite on Saturday. They covered the spread, came in about a 12-point favorite, won by 18. And I know not everyone's into the gambling lines. It's interesting, though. Vegas isn't in the business of losing money, and Purdue has struggled historically under Brohm as a favorite. They took care of business on Saturday. That's all they needed to do, and they got that done easily. Credit to Purdue for doing what needed to be done. All right, what you've been waiting on. I know I'm always going to love talking football as well, but it was a big week for basketball. They go 3-0. They started off with Wright State. Not much to say there. The only comment I had, and I tweeted this after the game, Wright State's best player scored 37 points in the game prior to playing Purdue. Against Purdue, he went 3 for 14 with 7 points and 7 turnovers. That's what dominant teams do to mid-majors. And I'm not talking about dominant teams as in a top 25 team. That's what a top 5 caliber team does to a mid-major that's usually a pretty good program. I noticed before I hit record, Wright State lost to George Washington today, so maybe it's not your best Raider team, but Purdue absolutely boat raced them, winning by 44. That's what elite teams do. That's all I've got to say about that. They went up to Mohegan Sun. The Hall of Fame Tip-Off Challenge, I think was the name. Look, you win 2 big games. This was a huge weekend for Purdue. Beat UNC 93-84, beat Villanova 80-74. You were able to take down 2 massive brands on a national stage. You took down a pair of programs that have won national titles in recent memory. 2017, UNC, they won it back in 2009. That Tyler Hansbrough team, they won it back in 2005 against Illinois. Villanova, 2018-2016. There's 2 of them for you. You beat 2 massive brands on a massive stage. And I know Saturday was harder because it's a football Saturday. You're playing on ESPN News. That's not ideal. But on Sunday, you're going up against the NFL, sure, but you're on ABC. If you're a college sports fan, if you're a Purdue fan, you were certainly watching instead of the Colts or Bears or whoever you root for. This was absolutely huge for Purdue. And I remember 2017, Caleb Swanigan declared for the NBA draft, and part of his farewell tweet or whatever was that we made Purdue sexy again. Well, it's 2021. It's about to be 2022. Purdue is far sexier now than it was in 2017. And a huge part of that, going into our breakdown now, Jaden Ivey is truly transformative. He had a great weekend. It wasn't always scoring, especially on Sunday. He had a really good day scoring the ball Saturday. But the way he leads a fast break and transition is something that Purdue's never had. Carson Edwards was fast, but Carson Edwards couldn't pass. Carson Edwards didn't really want to pass. You didn't see the same level of fast break manipulation from anyone else that Purdue's ever had. He's so explosive. His strides are so long. You saw some of these passes. He had one to Caleb first that was a jump pass right to a wide open first that was incredible. He's able to have elite impact without scoring. He was maybe Purdue's most important player on Sunday, and he didn't score a ton. I think he had just, 10 points? Jaden Ivey has elevated this team more than I think you ever could have imagined. And that's saying a lot because what Purdue has at the 5 is truly special. And we saw so much of it this weekend. We saw everything that makes Purdue's 5 spot one of the best in recent college basketball memory. Travion Williams on Saturday comes off the bench for 13 minutes, deals with foul trouble, 20 points on 8 of 10 shooting. And at the end of the game, when Purdue needed to put it away, he's able to help put it away. Purdue goes inside to Williams, and he takes care of what he needs to take care of. That's pretty incredible. He has embraced this role of coming off the bench in a way that is pretty hard to ask of a guy who has the accolades that Williams does. He took over as Purdue's best center back in the 2019-20 season. Then last year was an all Big Ten guy. He's coming off the bench now, and he's still producing at a really high level and bringing a ton of energy over on the sidelines. And that's awesome stuff. And he's coming off the bench because Zach Edey continues to reintroduce himself to the nation for those who may have forgotten about him over the summer. Against Villanova, he was incredible. 21 points, 9 of 12 shooting. The play that's going to stand with me was when he catches the ball 15 feet from the basket, puts it on the ground once, spins and dunks, jumping from 5 to 6 feet out. That's an athleticism that there aren't many 7'4" guys that have that. Zach Edey is insane. You haven't seen a player like him in college all that much. There aren't many like him in the world that exist, but to have what Purdue has with him and Travion Williams is incredible. And Edey's free throw shooting can't go underappreciated either. He's been very good at the line all year. That's going to be big. That's going to be big moving forward because, teams are going to try everything to stop these guys. Teams are going to try everything to get them off the floor. And if you can convert at the foul line when you're getting fouled, that just makes you all that much better. And we saw what happened. Purdue did get in foul trouble on Saturday. They had to play extended time in the first half with Caleb First at the 5 position. How about that kid? Caleb First has been incredible for Purdue this year. He is everything you could possibly hope for out of a freshman. He's probably going to be at the 5 long term, I think. I could see him sticking at the 4 as well, but, he's going to get minutes at the 5 in the future. He is the best third option at center in America. He can hang down there, but when he's at the 4, he's so incredibly comfortable. Smooth, easy jumper, knocked down a couple of big threes against Villanova. His three-point shooting has been far better than I even expected after what I knew of him in high school. He puts the ball on the floor well, dribbles it nicely for a guy who's 6'10 and is a freshman. Everything about him has been huge. He's not going to give up that starting spot. He's better than Mason Gillis is right now, and it's not all that close. Gillis really struggled coming back in his first action. That's okay. That happens. But the only downside of Purdue's size is what Villanova was able to do to it a little bit on Sunday when Purdue's centers, especially Zach Edey, just completely overwhelmed out on the perimeter. Now, Purdue has a million scoring weapons on offense to where it's hard to take that away from them. It's hard to not still score, especially when you're playing against a team that's so much smaller, the way Villanova was so much smaller. But at the same time, Nova did a really nice job of getting open shots because when you get past Purdue's big man, a few times Colin Gillespie got on Edey, and Gillespie gets past him, Stefanovic or Newman or Ivy has to come from the corners, and then that opens up a shooter every single time. There's no way to avoid it. So that's going to happen. That's part of playing as big as you do when you're Purdue. So at some point, that could cost Purdue a game. For right now, I think they're going to be just fine. I want to talk last part of the, analyzing the game before we talk big picture. Purdue's guard play outside Jaden Ivey is going to be really important to follow this year because that's going to be what can help Purdue win a national title. And yes, it's probably time that we start acknowledging that this is a true national title contender. I saw a stat, 10 of the last 11 champions have won their MTE. Well, Purdue just won their MTE, so you're in good shape there. Isaiah Thompson was massive for Purdue on Saturday. He's a dead-eye shooter. He doesn't try to do things he's not capable of, and that's huge. When you're the number 4, number 5 option on the floor, he's not getting a priority above the big guy, whoever it is, above Ivy or above Stefanovic. So, you're one of the last options. He's a dead-eye shooter. He doesn't turn the ball over. That's all you can ask for. He hit some huge shots down the stretch against Villanova. Excellent stuff from him. And I know it's easy to knock on his lack of height. I mean, we can all see it. We all see that Isaiah Thompson's not a skyscraper out there, but he's a very good defender. Guys don't blow by him. Sure, you can shoot over him a little easier than you can other players, but he does a nice job on the defensive end as well. Sasha Stefanovic was excellent on Saturday. Really, he got Purdue out to their early lead. Hit some incredible shots, off-balance shots that almost reminded you of Ryan Klein a little bit, that Stefanovic hasn't always been great at shooting. And you could tell Sunday in the second half a bit, his legs were getting tired. He had a huge fast break, steal, and layup that was I think that cut Purdue to a 3-point game when they were coming back on Nova. Hit a couple free throws late. Between Thompson and Stefanovic, those guys had Purdue's best plus-minuses on Sunday. Plus-minus is a very imperfect stat. And for those who don't know, it's simply what the score is when you're on the floor. How much your team wins or loses by when you're on the floor. And Thompson and Stefanovic ran laps around Purdue's reserve guards. It's not a perfect stat. There is a lot that goes into plus-minus that doesn't have anything to do with that individual player, but it does tell me something when Isaiah Thompson is far better than two guys who started last year in Eric Hunter and Brandon Newman. This is a really good lineup Purdue's rolling out there. It's not going to change anytime soon. Keep in mind that Eric Hunter Jr. and Brandon Newman would be starting for almost everyone else in the Big Ten. Eric Hunter's really good. I still like his game a lot. I think he's smooth on offense if he's not explosive. And Brandon Newman's a good shooter. These guys, and Eric Hunter Jr. also should have been all Big Ten defensive player last year. These guys are really good pieces. They are guys who would start for 11 teams in the Big Ten, if not more. They haven't gotten off to their best start at all. But for Purdue to be where it's at with both of those guys who started more games than not a year ago, not playing very well, this team is lethal. And in the big picture, you look at where the season goes from here. You beat two very different styles of teams. Purdue struggled with teams with the athleticism that North Carolina has, in the past at least. It's not always an area Purdue's done well with. When you have big guys on the wings, very fast point guards, and a good big guy. Armando Bacot's a good player. And then you have teams like Villanova that can just play 5 out all game. They didn't hide that at all. They tried to exploit Purdue as much as possible. They did quite a bit, but Purdue still beat them. And you're making yourself known nationally. You're the biggest story in college basketball today. I listened to CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast, Parrish and Norlander. The first thing they talk about is Purdue. When's the last time you heard Purdue as the biggest story in the nation, let alone in November? This is pretty crazy. The difficult portion of your non-conference is over. I know Florida State's coming in 2 weeks. That's going to be a pretty good game. Leonard Hamilton's program does present some issues for Purdue at times. They're always athletic and very long. So that's a little different. That's something Purdue hasn't always done well with. NC State, their best players out for the year. And as we're talking right now, I've got my phone out. Butler's down by 17 points to Houston. They started that game down 21-3. Think it's probably time that folks down in Broad Ripple start asking questions about Lavelle Jordan. That program's going nowhere. So, Purdue's not going to play another ranked team in non-conference, I don't think. Your 2 early Big Ten games, the 2 that you play in December, Iowa and at Rutgers. Iowa hasn't played anyone yet. I don't think they look that great. They just are beating up on a bunch of 200-plus KenPom teams. Rutgers lost to DePaul. That's inexcusable. That program's horrible. So even with Ron Harper Jr. and Geo Baker back, Rutgers is still struggling. Those should be 2 wins for you. Now, the downside is expectations are going to be sky high, and that's a blessing and a curse sometimes. You are looking like by far the best team in the Big Ten right now. Michigan just lost 2 games this past week to Seton Hall in Arizona. Illinois lost a bad game to Marquette. Granted, they didn't have Kofi Coburn, but Andre Curbelo lost that game for them single-handedly, and he was supposed to be your replacement for Io DeSunmu as an all Big Ten caliber guard. Ohio State doesn't look good. Xavier beat them, and Ohio State struggled with a bunch of mid-majors. Maryland looks awful. Their transfers aren't working out. Turgeon's going to Turgeon. Michigan State, Indiana, they look decent. Indiana certainly plays a lot harder for Mike Woodson than they did Archie Miller, but this isn't the same league it was last year. The pressure is solely on Purdue now to go win the Big Ten title. I said in the preseason I think they would do it, but all of that pressure is now swinging to Purdue, so your expectations are going to be high. Now, expectations don't really matter much for your game this week against Omaha. That's Friday at 2 p.m. Another lovely BTN Plus game, the final one for the year. I am sure those of you not in the Lafayette area are thrilled to know that that's going to be the last one. Look, Omaha's horrible. Just based off their KenPom rating, where they're number 323 in the nation. I think there's only 353. So they're a bottom 30 team in the nation. Purdue hasn't played a team below 200 in KenPom yet. This is a substantially worse team than what Purdue's played so far. If you believe in the KenPom metrics, they didn't play horrible, at least on the final score against Kansas State. But I don't know anything about them. They're the Mavericks. I learned that over the summer during a show once when I looked it up. Shouldn't be much of a sweat. Purdue just needs to stay focused. It's not an easy time. You're playing Black Friday at 2 p.m. After some massive wins, but we'll see what happens there. Should be an easy win for Purdue. Meanwhile, the big game in Purdue sports this weekend comes on Saturday. 3:30 kickoff on FS1. The battle for the Old Oaken Bucket, Purdue versus Indiana from Ross-Ade Stadium. Purdue comes in as 16-point favorites. The over-under as of Monday afternoon is 50.5. The first Old Oaken Bucket game since 2019. Last year was canceled due to COVID problems. I know there were some in Purdue's program. I heard there were some in Indiana's program, but they were trying to keep that awful bottled up. Last time these two teams played, Indiana with a double overtime thriller. Purdue came back pretty hard, but did not pull it off in the rain at Ross-Ade. All three bucket games in the Brohm era have been competitive. Brohm took it in 2017 and 2018. Touchdown wins in both of those that were games that the winner went to a bowl and the loser did not. So, it's a good rivalry. All three games have been good. The importance of winning this game is really big for Purdue. And I know it's weird to say that. I mean, Indiana's had an awful year. They came in predicted second in the Big Ten Big Ten East by the media. If they don't win this, they're going to go winless in Big Ten play. They're 2-9. They beat Idaho, and they beat Western Kentucky by 1 or 2. It was a close game, I know. You really just need to take care of business here. In 2019 and 2020, momentum shifted to Indiana. Purdue had all the momentum after 2018 in terms of the state conversation. And then they go and lose to Nevada. They get banged up. Purdue goes 4-8. Indiana goes 8-4. And last year, obviously, was a dream season for Indiana. They went, I think, 6-1 in the regular season. Lost their bowl game to Ole Miss. That really hurt them there. But Purdue has a chance here to put the finishing touch on 2021, where you can gain a lot of that momentum back. You saw the jawing. IU fans and players were really worked up when Joe Strickland picked Purdue over Indiana back in August. IU players were IU commits were tweeting to him. Now Purdue's back in that dominant seat in the state. You can put that final finishing touch on that momentum shift on Saturday. You have a great opportunity to. You'll hear our guest here in a minute talk about it. I don't know if Indiana's completely quit, but they aren't playing hard. They're fighting on the sidelines. They gave up 35 straight points last week. Their quarterback situation's a mess. However, I follow IU fairly closely. I pay attention, but let's let an expert do the rest of the preview here. Happy to be joined here today by a good buddy of mine, Derek Decker, senior in the sports media program down in Bloomington. Derek, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to this. Gives me an outlet to whine about Indiana football and other things surrounding IU athletics.
Well, certainly it hasn't been the year that Indiana fans were hoping for. You know, a year ago, Tom Allen and the LEO mantra were kind of the talk of college football. This year hasn't been the same. What's kind of the feeling around Indiana's program right now as they're about to wrap up a disappointing season?
Yeah, so it's just basically been a really bad regression for the worst FBS program in history. They found some success last year. The year before, they went 8-4 against an okay schedule. But they managed to find a couple of good wins. And I think at the end of the day, when you look at it, Indiana's had 30 scholarship players that have missed time due to injury. So there's different ways you can look at it, but that's thing number one is they've had to battle through a lot of injuries. They've obviously, right now they're on their fourth starting quarterback, and they're down to a preferred walk-on, who I think actually has a chance to start in the bucket game at Purdue on Saturday, but we'll talk about that later. I just think overall it's so disappointing because the fan support at the start of the season was unlike anything I've ever seen in my lifetime. I mean, you come down, 2 new classes of kids that have never been to a football game, freshmen and sophomores, ready to go. They open up with Idaho, which was nice because it's a guaranteed win. They were fine in that game. And then the atmosphere electric for Cincinnati. Looked to be one of the premier non-conference games in the first couple weeks of the season in the entire nation. I mean, that's a game that we had earmarked down here for several years, and especially knowing Desmond Ridder decided to stay, it's like, okay, this could be a legit top 25 matchup. This could be a lot of fun. Indiana had their chances in that game. And I think it's hard to maybe make a turning point of the season, but where they proved to me that they were not a legitimate team ready to contend with the big boys is when Micah McFadden got tossed in that Cincinnati game on the targeting call, which was questionable. That's whatever. I'm okay with it. The way Indiana responded was horrible after that because IU was in control of that game. I mean, they had – the defense was outstanding in the first half of that game. Since then, the offense has completely taken a turn for the worse. And again, the blame is shared. You can go down the line. Nick Sheridan's play calling has been terrible. Michael Penix wasn't who we thought he would be again this year, and Tuttle was underwhelming as well, and he's battled through injuries. So you can go down the line. And, of course, Indiana's running back room, which looked to be maybe the deepest spot on the team, got significantly smaller as the weeks wore on. You know, you think about Samson James, then Tim Baldwin, and guys just start leaving right and left. And, of course, Stephen Carr being injured and not playing either the last couple of weeks has not helped the situation. Indiana's offensive line was never that great to begin with. I mean, there are problems all over with this team. I think it's still a solid defensive unit, a top half Big Ten unit. But offensively, they're the worst team in the country. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's certainly been some serious regression, and it's been interesting from obviously, you know, I don't follow the program hard, but I watch Indiana, and the regression of Penix was certainly something. It's been interesting, though, now is seeing Donovan McCulley play as a true freshman. You know, he's a guy that Jeff Brohm recruited pretty hard, chose Indiana. Talk a little bit about where that quarterback position is at now as we head into the bucket game to wrap up the year for IU.
Well, that's a pretty loaded question because Indiana is going to have 4 quarterbacks available. Penix is listed as available. IU Athletics has this very bad reputation of keeping things very secretive across all sports. It doesn't just apply to football, but every week when somebody gets hurt, they're week to week. So you never really know, and Penix has not been suited up in actual pads in a few weeks on game day, but he was slinging it around prior to the Minnesota game on Saturday. So possibility remains that Penix could start as well. But I just think McCulley, and Tom Allen talked about this in his press conference after the loss on Saturday to Minnesota, said at the end of the day, we thought we wanted to redshirt him. I mean, that was the plan going forward for McCulley, was get him a little bit of work in some games. Obviously, you have the 4-game cushion to work with, and then redshirt him. And they just didn't have the opportunity to do that with Penix getting hurt so early in the season, like lots of IU fans and people around the program expected. He's just a guy that's very prone to injury. And then Tuttle getting blasted against Ohio State. I thought Indiana's response and the package they had drawn up for McCulley was pretty poor. Tom Allen came out after that Ohio State game and said, well, we really weren't expecting McCulley to come into the game. It's like, okay, you were one snap away from that happening, and they were totally caught off guard by that, and they just didn't have an offensive plan for him. McCulley's shown some flashes to me where he could be good in the future, but I think he's much more of a dual threat guy, maybe a wildcat kind of guy in the future. His arm strength has been very underwhelming. Last week, he threw a couple of picks, and they were bad. I mean, the decision-making you can understand, you can work with. He's put in a bad situation. There's no way to get around that. But it was too early for McCulley. Not to say that can't be beneficial in the future, but this year for Indiana, it just completely turned into a train wreck on offense, even though I think he has shown some flashes of potential.
And then there's the walk-on. Talk a little bit about him.
Yeah, I'm impressed with Grant Gremmel. He's more of your prototypical stand in the pocket, Nate Sudfeld kind of guy where he's just going to try to stand in there and sling it. But he showed the ability in the second half yesterday, because he played most of the second half, to get outside the pocket, escape. Minnesota brought blitzes on almost every down just to try to hurry him, speed him up, and hurry his decision-making. But he responded well. He's a guy that, for another true freshman and a preferred walk-on, looks very comfortable in the pocket. He's got good arm strength. He threw a couple of really good balls on the last drive for Indiana. Personally, I'd like to see him start against Purdue. Tom Allen left that door open. He said, whatever we've got to do to win is what we're going to do. So he did leave open the opportunity to potentially start him. I think at the very least he'll get a chance at a couple of drives against Boilers.
Ty Freifogel is a pretty household name in the Big Ten. He's put together a really nice career at IU. Outside of Freifogel, who are some skill position weapons that Purdue fans should keep an eye on Saturday?
Well, Indiana doesn't have much in that scenario. And just to Freifogel's point, he has, coming into yesterday, Jordan, he was in the top 10 in drop rate in the entire nation. He had dropped over 15% of his passes, which is just amazing for a guy that was the Big Ten receiver of the year last year. This guy's an All-American, and just since the start of the year, that he hasn't had a single game where he's looked comfortable and under control. I mean, every game he's had drops. You even think back to the Western Kentucky game where Indiana's offense clicked for most of the night against a really bad Hilltopper defense, and he had a couple of bad drops in that game that cost him a touchdown or two. So it's just been the recurring storyline. I'd say offensively, the biggest weapon, to be honest with you, maybe Miles Marshall, receiver on the edge for Indiana, other than Freifogel. And then Malachi Holt-Bennett has been used more in the passing game. They've targeted him a bunch. He had a touchdown grab yesterday late in the game in garbage time against Minnesota. But obviously the biggest receiver all year for Indiana, no team utilizes their tight end like IU, and Peyton Hendershot out of the backfield is outstanding. He's a good run blocker, but he really has pass-catching ability. Indiana uses their tight ends and also backup A.J. Barner, who's been good for IU in the passing game as well. But Hendershot is the guy that they target most. He's one of their most reliable pass catchers, and that's just wild to say for being a tight end, but he leads them in grabs.
On the defensive side of the ball, you talked about the importance of Micah McFadden earlier. He's there. I know they had some losses from last year's defense, but what's kind of contributed to the regression on that side of the ball as well?
I think more so on the defensive end, it's just been injuries. They just have had so many injuries. They have been down to third-string guys and walk-ons at times this year as well. Tywan Mullen hasn't had a bad year, but again, he's only played about half the season with injuries. Reese Taylor on the opposite corner has been okay. Raheem Lane has dealt with injuries at safety. It's just been across the board. Indiana has dealt with all kinds of injuries. McFadden, I mean, he's NFL ready right now. Like that guy is an outstanding linebacker. He's got the speed. He's got the agility. He's very disciplined on defense. He doesn't make mistakes. But I just think that, once things started opening up, Indiana had begun to get gashed. And part of that is because they've been on the field the entire season. Indiana's offense just hasn't been able to put together a drive. Minnesota was plus 12 minutes in time of possession yesterday. It's just like you can't afford to do that when you have an offense that just can't move the football. You're putting your defense in bad positions. Indiana's offense has turned it over way too much. And I think the storyline for IU, last year they had 17 interceptions in the 8 games that they played, or the 9 games with the bowl game. And this year they've only forced a combined 9 turnovers. They haven't had a fumble recovery since September. So they just they're not as opportunistic. I think the offense wasn't as good last year as everybody thought it was. It was good and it was fun to watch, but they were also put in really good spots at times by their defense, and that has not been the case at all this season.
We'll get to the actual score prediction in a minute, but, Indiana opening up as 15-point dogs. What's going to happen for the Hoosiers to keep the bucket down south this year?
Well, Indiana's going to have to control time of possession, and that's just almost an impossible thing to do for this offense that hasn't won a time of possession battle basically all season long. But that's what they're going to have to do, is they're going to have to keep their defense fresh, because I think if Indiana's able to just sustain and get some first downs, doesn't even mean punching it into the end zone, get some first downs, I think we get into a really low-scoring game, and that's what they're going to have to do, is ugly it up. Purdue's defense has been good. Surprising to me at the start of the season, I thought this unit would just be okay, and they've really been outstanding. George Karlaftis has been awesome for the Boilers this year, so I think that they've been a lot better than expected on that side of the football. But Indiana's going to have to find a way to sustain some drives, even if that doesn't mean finishing in points. And I think, again, it does go back to forcing turnovers. It's been a couple weeks since they've done that. They're going to have to do that to put their offense in some, favorable situations to try to get into the end zone. Because if you've got a guy like Grant Gremmel in the game, or maybe Mike Penix, I don't really see the benefit of bringing him back for one game at the end of the year just to get him hurt again because he's made of glass. I would say Gremmel or McCauley, or maybe Tuttle if he's ready. But they're going to have to force turnovers and win time of possession. And if they do that, I think they could ugly this game up enough to make it close and potentially win a low-scoring game.
All right, prediction time. Can they do it? Can they muck it up enough to pull it off?
Of course not. I think Purdue wins this game 45-6. This game is not going to be close.
Wow.
This is back – really have to test my memory here. Back in early 2010s, maybe late 2000s, they put one down on Indiana. It's like 62-10.
Yeah, it was Joe Tiller's last game at Purdue.
Right. And I feel like that kind of game is brewing here for Indiana. Now, they played – I will say, Indiana was hapless against Rutgers. That was maybe the worst game that I've seen Indiana play in years and years. Fumbled on the first play, snow flurries, nobody there, terrible, terrible attendance. Just everything went wrong for Indiana that day, 5 turnovers. I think they played with a little bit more energy last week against Minnesota. They got a 4th down stop in the first quarter and then went on an almost 7-minute drive to score a touchdown to take the lead. And Indiana looked like a Compton offense, a 14-play drive, used a lot of McCauley draws and runs on that particular drive, and then they just sputtered from then on out the rest of the game. But it's getting off to an okay start where you feel like you're in the game, even if they're down a touchdown or something going into halftime. You have to keep it close the entire game. I don't think they're able to do that. And offensively, they just haven't been able to sustain drives. So Purdue's going to score at will, going to be in some good situations. I just don't foresee this thing being close at halftime. I think Purdue covers easy.
Well, Derek, if your 45-6 prediction comes to fruition, I think my listeners are going to be really happy. Appreciate you coming on the show today, though. I know you'll be in the press box at Ross-Ade Stadium, so you won't have to bundle up as much as the rest of us, but should be a good game. I've been
to plenty of bucket games in the ice cold, so I think I deserve one off.
There you go. Yeah, it's weather's looking all right now, but it can always change before Saturday. But thank you for coming on, Derek. We appreciate your time, and enjoy your Thanksgiving.
Hey, no problem. Thanks so much for having me on, Jordan.
All right. Thank you, Derek Decker. Awesome guest on the show. Good buddy of mine. Knows a lot about Indiana football. He has been in the press box all year and has seen it all unfold. So, I don't know that 45-6 is going to be my prediction, but 3 keys to the game here. Purdue does these 3, and they're going to win going away, and they may win 45-6. Number 1, come out ready to play strong. Purdue started a little slow against Northwestern. Finneran misses a field goal early. Purdue settles for a couple more field goal drives and let Northwestern's offense stay on the field a bit. Now, I know you could afford it against IU, but why risk it? Come out and play strong and smash them in the mouth early. and make that program show that they haven't quit. Number 2, pick off some passes. I was hoping Purdue would get an interception before garbage time last weekend. They didn't. If Donovan McCulley gets the start for IU, this one could mean a little more for Purdue. His recruitment saga where, Purdue ended up taking Sam Jackson over him. He commits to IU the next day. That was weird. And with Sam Jackson decommitting, it made it even weirder. They start McCulley, go get him. Take care of him. Let him know he went to the wrong place. If they start the walk-on, go get him. He's a walk-on. And I know that sounds ironic because Purdue is starting a walk-on, or a former walk-on. But, if you start the walk-on, don't let him get momentum going because the team will rally around that kid. Regardless, you go force an interception, force some turnovers early, and, again, make IU show that they haven't quit. And number 3, discipline. Purdue's playing for something here. Purdue's 7-4. You want to get to that 8-win season. That's been a rarity in Purdue football history. Indiana's got nothing going for it besides trying to keep the bucket. They've been fighting with each other on the sidelines. Things aren't well down there. They're not loving each other. And they're going to try to bait Purdue into dumb penalties. They'll jaw at Purdue. They'll try to make Purdue respond. You got to be smart. You got to be the bigger team. Purdue does those 3 things. They'll be fine. I think Purdue will be fine. I'm going 35-17. I was looking back at bucket games in the past. I think this is the most lopsided matchup on paper since 2013 in terms of records coming in. That was, of course, Darrell Hazel's lovely 1-11 season when Purdue gave up a 50-burger down in Bloomington. You got to go act like it. Take care of business here. Bring the bucket home. And if you can do that, if you can come out and take care of business and deliver an emphatic win, 8-4 would be one heck of a season. And then you're looking at the bowls. Right now, looks like maybe Las Vegas and New York are the 2 most likely outcomes. I think everyone in their right mind would rather have Vegas than an outdoor stadium and another baseball stadium on December 28th or whatever. I don't think anyone wants to deal that, but we'll know for sure next Sunday. We'll talk more about bowl destinations on next week's show once we know what Purdue's record is and where they're at in the pecking order. I wanted to close with one topic today, and this isn't going to be long, but one of the big stories in college football this past week was Mel Tucker reportedly being offered a 10-year, $95 million extension by Michigan State. Of course, that didn't age as well when Ohio State was up 49-0 at halftime, coasted to a 56-7 victory against the Spartans on Saturday. But, the extension offer comes after, there's a million jobs open right now. Southern Cal, Florida, LSU are 3 big-time jobs that are open. Miami might open. Washington might open. Washington is open, I guess. There are jobs open all over the place. And Mel Tucker's name's being floated there. If that sounds familiar, Purdue was in that a few years ago with Jeff Brohm. First to Tennessee after 2017, then to Louisville in 2018. And folks look at the $9.5 million a year average, and it's excessive, and of course it is. But welcome to modern college football. There's that great clip of Matt Painter yelling to his team at Assembly Hall in 2018. This game is not for the weak. Competing in high-level college football is not for the weak anymore. Purdue got by a long time without investing in football much at all. Darrell Hazel was Purdue's first $1 million football coach. Danny Hope never even made $1 million a year. They did so little to renovate that indoor facility for so long after it went up in the 90s. Purdue really just didn't invest in so long, and now they finally have that investment. The performance complex there, on the northeast side of Ross-Ade Stadium is spectacular. And now it's coming up for Purdue to reinvest because this offseason, it's probably time to look at tacking on years to the end of Jeff Brohm's current deal. It runs through 2025, about $5.5 million a year. I'm not saying that some huge raise is coming. I don't think Jeff Brohm's getting $9.5 million. I don't think he's going to get $7 million a year. Maybe he'll go over the $6 million threshold. But he's going to get extended. Just prepare for it because you have to. You have to keep these contracts going for recruiting purposes and to dissuade other schools from coming to get your coach, because I don't know if it'll happen this year. Of these jobs that are out there, I don't know what would suit him well. I know the SEC would not. Jeff Brohm would not be a good coach in the SEC. Those programs are too larger than life for him. That's not his personality. He's not a West Coast guy. He's from Louisville. He's not going to go far away. But at some point, you never know. If the right job came knocking, maybe he'd be interested. And if you're Purdue, you can't afford to lose this guy because you don't have a good history of hiring coaches. You got to stick well with what you've got. I just wanted to talk about that because I know it's a topic I'm passionate about. I love the coaching carousel, and just wanted to point that out, that while it's crazy what's going on out there, Purdue has to follow suit as well because it's a zero-sum game with coaches. There are only so many good coaches out there, and there are only so many games to be won. But hey, that's all I have for you today, folks. I appreciate you all spending some time with me. It's Thanksgiving week, so I know time is of the essence. Thank you. I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving with family and friends. We'll be back here again next week. We'll talk about the bucket game. We'll talk about what should be a riveting Purdue versus Omaha game. We'll have a clearer bowl projection, kind of know what's going on there. And then Purdue will have a couple big basketball games to preview. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss it. Until next time, enjoy a blessed holiday weekend.